Okay, welcome back to Bible 365. Today is day 16, and this is reading through the Bible chronologically, through the 1 year chronological Bible study plan. And so, if you are joining me for the first time, I recommend that you go all the way back to some of the prior videos where I explain what we're doing and why, and then start at day one. So, it doesn't matter what time of the year you start, but I recommend that you go back to one because I think it helps to understand the full vibe of the story. But if you are still with me today on day 16, we're coming to the end of Genesis. And so, right now, we are discussing the life of Joseph. To give you a little bit of background, Joseph is the 11th son of Jacob, who is the son of Isaac, who is the son of Abraham, who is the father of the Israelites. He is the one that God had made a covenant with, and it is now moving through the generations of his sons. And so we see where Joseph had some struggles in the past, and now he is the second in command in Egypt. So he is not in his home where his fathers are, but he is in Egypt with foreigners. So he's living in a foreign land. However, he is essentially running the land. The only person above him is Pharaoh. He is currently married and he has two children, as far as we know, Manasseh and Ephraim. And so at this point, there is a 7 year famine in the land. And so Joseph has taken control of the situation. He had a dream. He saw, or he, excuse me, interpreted a dream, and he saw that there was going to be 7 years of plenty, and then there was going to be 7 years of famine. And so we are in the 7 years of famine section. And now we find ourselves with the other brothers who thought they killed Joseph, or at least knew that they sold him into slavery, and they knew that he was gone. They assumed that he was dead. And so we see them, and they are back home and they are with their father. So, verse 1, I just sort of looking at the relationship between Jacob and the rest of these sons. And so, right away in verse 1, it says, when Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you just keep looking at each other? And then he continues, I have heard that there's grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die. So, uh, it doesn't seem like they have the best of relationships. I don't think that that is a phrase. Why are you looking at just standing there looking at each other? It doesn't sound like a positive phrase. And so I'm assuming that there's maybe a little bit of frustration or anger or animosity. And if you remember when he thought that when he thought that Joseph had died, he was essentially like, my life is over. Uh, I am dead. And, I just wait to see him again. And so it seems like that really hasn't gotten much better, and he's not really showing kindness to the brothers, but he is sending them down to Egypt to go get some grain. So 10 brothers went down. And then in verse 6, I see here it says, now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all the people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. So they come up, they have no idea who Joseph is. They don't realize it's his brother, or their brother, excuse me. So they come here and they all bow down to him. And it just brings back, obviously, a couple of days ago, and a couple of chapters ago, where one of the reasons that they got so upset in the first place was that Joseph saw in one of his dreams, he had a dream where all the brothers were going to bow down to him. And then here we are, the fulfillment of the dream. They all come to Egypt and they all bow down to him unknowingly, but they still bow down to him. So in verse 9, it says, then he remembered his dreams about him. So the brothers come here and they say, we came to buy food. And in verse 8, it says, although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. They didn't know it was him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, you are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected. And so it looks to me as though he remembered his dreams, right, where they were going to bow down to him, and then everything that happened that followed that. So is he testing them here? What would make him say that they were spies? Obviously, if they were spies, he has the freedom to kill them and to get rid of them and be done with them. So why is he giving him this hard time and calling them spies? I assume he would obviously know it's his brothers. They really are coming for food and they're not spies. So it seems like he's pushing in this area to see what happens. And so moving on to verse 15, Verse 15, it says, and this is how you will be tested. So here we go. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. So he's giving them this test. And I'm sure it could be for a number of reasons. So if I'm thinking in my head, this is his brother that he hasn't met before. And so this brother, for some reason, is home. And so he wants to see this brother. And another reason could be, are they going to listen to me? Have they changed? Are they any different than they were before? Before they hated me and wanted to kill me. Is that the same now? Or is that any different? And so he throws them in jail for 3 days. Then verse 22, moving down to verse 22, they're upset. So they've been thrown in jail for 3 days, and then they remember what they did to Joseph. Even though they don't realize this is Joseph, they have a memory and they say, we're essentially being punished because of what we did to Joseph. And in verse 22, Reuben replies, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. So here I go again, like this book of Genesis, there's so much where people get either rewarded or punished for, it looks like, for other people. Reuben, if you remember back a few chapters ago, Reuben wanted to save him. Reuben said, let's just throw him in the cistern, and then he was going to come back and he was going to collect him and he was going to bring him back home. So in Reuben's heart, he wanted to protect Joseph. Now, obviously he didn't do that, but in his heart, that was what he wanted to do. And until he found out that they had sold him into slavery. And yet he says, we must account for his blood. So even though Reuben technically wasn't responsible for what happened to Joseph, he's taking the blame and the punishment for that. And it looks like willingly. So he says we. So he looks like he's willingly going to accept the punishment for Joseph. And so this is not the first time we see that. And so it makes me curious to see, is that still the case now? So do we still get punished as a unit, right? So is there blessings and punishments for other people who may not have done so? Because of, if I follow the Lord and if I love the Lord, will people around me be blessed because of my love for the Lord? If I do something evil against the Lord, will people be punished around me because of that evil? And so do we still see that same thing happening now? I'm going to say yes, although I'm not 100% sure if that's true, but I'm going to say yes. It looks like those things still happen now. So that leads me to even think in my faith, how would I then want to treat the people around me? Would I want people around me to be blessed, or would I want people around me to be punished? So there's some responsibility that I hold that will protect the people around me and bless the people around me versus having the people around me be punished. So that's sort of a takeaway for me with when it comes to understanding the way that things work in the world, the way God works. So moving on to verse 25. So what they do is they give money for the grain. And then in verse 25, Joseph says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep one person in jail, and then I'm going to send the rest of you back to go get your brother and bring him back to me. And then what he does is he fills their bags with grain to send them back home. And then he gives them back all the money that they originally gave. So they get sent back with the grain and with all of their money. And then in verse 35, it looks like they are scared. So it says, as they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. When they and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Which would feel like a boon, right? If we get the grain in our pouch and then we also get the money back in our pouch, you would think that it would be exciting. Like oh my gosh, they gave us back their money. So why would they be so scared? Did they think it was an accident? And if it was an accident, would they be punished when it came to the reckoning, or if they went back down to go get more grain? So there was definitely some fear in maybe what they thought was, they thought they would look like they were stealing the grain. There was some fear there instead of excitement. And then when we go to going on to verse 37, it says, Reuben said to his father, so they want to bring their brother back, and Jacob is not having it. He's really upset, and he said, I already lost one son. I'm not losing another. And then he even goes on to say, everything is against me, which obviously isn't true. When we go to verse 37, it says, Reuben says to his father, you may put, so Reuben is the oldest son, you may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back. But Jacob says, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you're taking, you will bring gray hair, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow. And so Jacob is not trusting anyone but himself. And so seeing the sacrifice of Reuben, I think there's a change in Reuben that he wants to, obviously he was upset about what happened. He realizes that there's a punishment about what happened before, and he still wants to step up and do even more. So to offer his own sons, because he would be so protective over Benjamin that he would be willing to offer his own sons, I think really shows a growth in him. Considering too that he was the one who, way back when, killed everyone for Dinah. So, and then Jacob, we see, just doesn't trust. He refuses to send him. So then we're going to move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 43. And I'm going to move down to verse 8. So Judah says to his father, so now we're going down to the fourth son, Judah. Judah says to his father, send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and our children may live and not die. So what's happening is they're telling their father, please continue to send, you have to send us back. We need food. We're starving. We need to go back, but we need to go back. And we're only allowed to go back because the man said we must bring our brother. And so they're essentially begging Jacob over and over again. And now Judah is saying, you can hold me personally responsible. So we have now another son. Judah is the one who messed up a little bit with Tamar a couple of chapters back. And again, so now we see some sacrifice and some growth in Judah. He's holding responsibility for anything that happens to the son in this situation, for his love for his father. So verse 14, I think, is where it gets a little interesting. So if we're starting in verse 14, well, starting back in verse 11, it says, their father Israel, Jacob, said to them, if it must be, then do this. So he's making a plan. Put some of the best products in the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm, a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you. So remember, they put the silver back in the bags. For you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, so he's given them the freedom to take Benjamin, and go back to the man at once. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back to you. So remember, the one brother is in jail, which Jacob seemed fine, leaving that brother in jail. So what he's done is he's made a plan, part one. Part two, he's prayed. So he asks the Lord to grant mercy, to grant these brothers mercy, to send back all of the brothers, including the one that's in jail. And then finally, at the very end, he says, as for me, if I am bereaved, I'm bereaved. So I feel like he's submitting himself to the Lord. So he made a plan. It's not that he did nothing and he just said, whatever happens, happens. Makes a plan, sends everybody out, prays, asks God for everyone to come back. And then he settles himself in that whatever happens, happens. This is really left in the Lord's hands. I think it's a great plan for me, as I remember, again, what I was talking about yesterday, fighting on my knees versus fighting with my fists up. It doesn't mean I don't make a plan or I don't think about the things that need to be done and try and put some of those things in place. But then I need to pray to God and ask him for it. And then I need to leave it to him and trust that whatever God decides to happen is what God wants to happen. And therefore that is what's best. And that's what I need to leave it to. And I'm saying that without an ounce of being comfortable saying that, because it's really hard to just trust that whatever God does is what God wants to happen, and that I need to submit to that, because sometimes I want to hold it and control it in much bigger ways. So then we go to verse 23. So moving on from here, we're going down to verse 23. It's when the brothers come back. And in verse 23, they see Joseph, but they still don't know it's Joseph. And Joseph says, Joseph leaves them to the servant. And so the servant says to them, because they're scared, And the servant says to him, it's all right, don't be afraid. And he says, your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver. And then he brought Simeon out to them. So he brought the brother out to be with the rest of them. So now they're all together. The brother's out of jail. But I like that he said, your God. So again, there's a recognition that they have their gods. This God is the God of the Israelites. And so he sees that their God is protecting them and that their God gave them that. So there is a sort of a respect there that they recognize that this God is working and that this God is who he says he is. It's just not their God. And then verse 26, we see them bowing again. So here we go with that dream, seeing them bowing again. And then in verse 32, one of the things I noted was it says that they served him by himself. So now Joseph has come. Joseph is separated because he's one of the top people in the land. And they served Joseph by himself. They served the brothers by themselves. And the Egyptians ate by themselves because Egyptians couldn't eat with Hebrews because it was detestable to them. My personal note in this, obviously, is hating to see that people groups don't eat with each other. There's just always separation and animosity. And I think that that is definitely not what Jesus wants. I think that he wants us coming together and eating with each other and celebrating with each other together. And I think that there is a joy for him when we do that. But the other thing that I noted was there have to be enough Hebrews for this to be true. So the Egyptians would have to know that there were Hebrews and there had to be a lot of them. And so my mind sort of, when I read this, my mind sort of comes to this place that there's only, the 12 brothers and Jacob, but it looks like from Abraham, right, the line spread out where there are enough Hebrews that the Egyptians know who they are. Because remember, they're in Canaan. It's not like, well, they're a little spread out now, but they came from Canaan. So it's not that they live exactly in the same area, right? It's not like they had internet or cell phones or anything like that where they would be really familiar, but they traveled and probably sold things to each other. But there were enough Hebrews that they were a people group. They were a nation at this point. So it wasn't just the 12 sons and a couple scattered here and there. So those are just kind of visuals that I tend to forget that it is bigger than just that. Moving on to Genesis 44. This is it's not our last chapter, but I just want to get to a couple of things in here. So in verse 4, coming down to here, so they put everything in, they put the cup into Benjamin's bag. So at this point, Benjamin's been treated a little bit differently already. Benjamin, remember, is the youngest brother of Joseph. It's the second born of Rachel. So again, it's another favored son, and he's very, very young at this point, possibly 13, because Joseph's been gone 13 years. So he's the youngest son. And on verse 4, it says, They hadn't gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, Go after those men, and when you catch up with them, say to them, Why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup that my master drinks from and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing that you have done. I think the first question is the important question. Now, obviously, this is a setup. So Joseph puts the cup in the bag. It's set up for what we see to transpire. But that first question, I feel like, is a really good and important question. Why have you repaid good with evil? Because the brothers did do that in the very beginning. The brothers didn't like what Joseph had to say, and so they repaid that with evil. And so even though Joseph was speaking to them about a dream that they had, remember way back when they dropped him in the cistern and then sold him off to slavery, even though Joseph had a dream from God, they repaid that with evil by sending him into slavery. And so I think that this is a good and important question for them to sort of think over and digest. This particular situation is not really what they did. So moving on to verse 9, I'm looking in verse 9 and I see it says, if any of your servants are found to have it, so now they're talking about the cup, if any of your servants are found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become, this is these are the brothers talking to him. The brothers talking to them because they said they're looking through and they're trying to find the cup. And the brothers say, if any one of us, the servants of Pharaoh and of Egypt, if any one of us are found with the cup, that person who has the cup is going to die, and then the rest of them will become the Lord's slaves. And then I like this. The guy says, very well, Let it be as you say. But he doesn't really let it be as you say. He says, whoever's found to have it will become my slave. The rest of you will be free from blame. So he changes it a little bit because obviously he doesn't want anyone to die. And so the person who finds it now, the deal is whoever has the cup is going to be the slave, but then all the other brothers are going to be allowed to go. Obviously, we know Benjamin has this. Going to verse 11, each one of them quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. Then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest, ending with the youngest, and it was found in Benjamin's sack. So then verse 14, we see them prostrating themselves again. So now Joseph was there, and he comes in, and they throw themselves on the ground before him. This is now the third time that we see they have thrown themselves on the ground. So here we go again with the dream that he had about them prostrating himself in front of them. Just so we know, so this vision is shown over and over and over again. So we know that it is true, it has come to pass. And then in verse 16, he says, what can we say to my Lord? What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now my Lord's slaves, we ourselves and the one who was found to have the cup. And so once again, Judah is giving it over to God. So I just love the way these brothers grow. Judah is just giving all of his faith and everything over to God. He didn't try and say it wasn't us. He didn't try and say someone tried to set us up. He says, what can we say? God has shown that this is true. The cup was in our bag. And so he sort of submits himself and gives himself over to Joseph. So then I see in verse 33, here we go again with Judah. Judah says, now please let your servant himself, Judah's talking about himself, remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return to his brothers. Because Joseph said, I'm only going to take the one, the rest of you can go. And now Judah is taking his place. So this is a great picture. Judah sacrificing himself. Reuben was willing to sacrifice himself. Now we see that Judah is literally telling him, I'm going to sacrifice myself. I will stay. Send him home. Even though we know Judah has sons at home, right? So this is this isn't, not a big sacrifice. He has a woman and he has sons and a family at home. And I'm sure land and things that he has to take care of, but he's completely sacrificing himself in order to have Benjamin go back home to be with his father. Moving on to Genesis 45, Joseph reveals himself to them. There's a lovely homecoming. Everyone cries and they're all excited to see each other. Obviously, the brothers are shamed. And in verse 8, Joseph says to them, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all of Egypt. He gives all of the glory to God. Even the things that hurt, he gives all of that over to God, and he recognizes that there was a place that he needed to be, and God has him there for a reason and for a purpose. And so he could have mourned, he could have been angry, and I'm sure we're going to look at this and go, yeah, but he was serving a household. I want to be very clear. 13 years he suffered. 13 years he was torn from his family. 13 years, including lots of years in jail. Jail is no pretty place to be, even if it's one of the better portions of jail. So 13 years he was here, and he recognized that he was used as an instrument of God in order to do good things for people. And in order, so now we see that prophecy that he had, that dream, was also fulfilled. So God fulfilled his prophecy, and God used Joseph to save and protect people that were going to be in the famine. And then verse 13 is going to be the last one that I do. And it says, tell your father about all the honor accorded me in Egypt and about everything I have seen, and bring my father down here quickly. So he's excited and he wants his family to come and join him in Egypt. And so we're going to leave him off here because it looks like a great family homecoming. And tomorrow will be the 17th day. Tomorrow we're coming again even closer to the end of Genesis. We're going to see what happens with Joseph and his family. If this has been any kind of blessing to you guys, I would like if you liked it and shared it, post it anywhere, and subscribe to the channel so you can get the videos each day as they pop up. Keep reading and come back tomorrow.